Hello everyone, welcome back. You're watching Empyrion Galactic Survival episode 91. I'm Enigmius and today we're continuing with the Cetorhinus build. We're working on the superstructure now. The hangar is mostly done and it's a matter of putting the superstructure on top of the hangar that will have all of the equipment that we'll be needing to get this thing in the air and doing what it's supposed to do. In order to do that, one of the first things that I wanted to do was set up the profiles, which we did in the last episode. We got pretty much everything in place to kind of give us a general idea of where some of the key elements would be and how they might look, especially from the front. And now we're roughing in the details, specifically on the arms, if you will, that are going to be holding the lift thrusters. We've got two extra large capital vessel thrusters on each side is what we will eventually have. Right now we've just got the two on the side that we're working on. And we're closing them in and adding basically some aesthetic detail to the arm so that it looks kind of interesting. It's got sort of an elliptical shape coming down the sides, and then it's going to be doing some weird things on its way back up towards the area where the core and the cockpit currently are, just because I decided to do something a little bit different. It's one of those things where I start with one basic shape and then sort of fill in the rest of the details sort of on the fly. In this case, it worked out reasonably well. I can't say that I'm super thrilled about it. It's one of those things that I'm okay with. It doesn't have to be something that impresses the hell out of me in order for me to keep it. It just can't be the kind of thing that I look at and say blah, which you never know. My policy, as many of you know by now, is to just kind of get it roughed in, leave it there for a day or two, and see if I still feel okay with it. And if not, then we'll make some changes. So you can see we've basically got this built in so that the thrusters are encased all the way around. And then we've got that extra detail coming off to the sides. And now it's just a matter of figuring out how this is going to transition up onto the top of the hangar in a way that looks interesting and that we can work with going forward as all of the other elements are coming together. In the background there, in case you missed the last episode, you can see we've already got blocks in place for the profile for the rear detailing, which is going to be purely aesthetic. As far as I can tell right now, just off the top of my head, I haven't come up with any sort of functional elements to it. It's just there to look a certain way. In this case, this one aspect that we've got in place involves two profiles. We've got the one that we already did, that's for the underside of this arm or wing or whatever you want to call it. And now we're doing a profile for the upper side, the top side, as it's coming up and around. Working with profiles on this scale is, I talk about it a lot because it's a big deal when it comes to being able to figure out where we want to put things and how we want to set things up. We can get an idea out of our brains into the game very simply. Doesn't take a lot of blocks, which means if we want to change it, it's very quick and easy to change. And we can just kind of mess around with it and see how it looks in its most simple form instead of building this big giant structure and trying to make everything fit in ways that won't necessarily be visible from all the different angles that you're going to want to look at it. So you can see now we started with that profile. I was happy with the profile, and now all it takes to fill in the majority of the structure is to just extend blocks to either side of the profile, just matching blocks extending left and right until it's done. And then when we get up to the top, that's when we have to start thinking about how everything's going to come together off the sides of this structure as we're looking at it now. So we've got the top section is going in, the left and right sides, and the underside are still to be placed. The underside is going to be very similar to what we're doing now, just extending blocks off the profile left and right. But getting everything to fit together on the sides is where the challenge in this particular setup is going to be. You can see how quickly that went together for the amount of space that we just covered. And all it is starting with the profile and then quickly pulling things, extending them to either side. And in this case, the blocks that I'm placing now, there's nothing in the game right now that forces you to make sure that all of the blocks on your ship are connected to at least one other block. But I'm so used to building that way from other games that I just don't feel like it's complete until I've done that. I've gone and I've found all the places where the blocks are just kind of dangling, so to speak. If there's ever a rule added where blocks that are disconnected from the structure itself will basically become orphaned and be destroyed, we're ready for it. is one way to look at it. It's not a necessary thing, but it's something that I just do out of habit. And it's, like I say, it's not just habit. It's that I just don't feel right about it until it's done. Now this here is another example of getting everything to tie in. We're using those 3 sloped blocks. They start with the larger of the two 22.5 degree ramps. And then there's 2 additional blocks that you put together, and it comes almost to a straight line across the 3 blocks, but it's actually got a little bit of a curve, and I've been using that a fair bit in this build so far. It has the potential to look really good in certain situations, and if it's overused, it also has the potential to look pretty awful. In this case, I'm pretty happy with the way that it's looking, but we have to keep in mind that when we get off to the sides, like over here where we're working now, we don't have any blocks that will allow us to merge everything together seamlessly. So there are going to be some instances in various different places where things they don't come together seamlessly. And either we have to be okay with that, or we have to adjust the way that we're looking at it in a way that will allow us to get somewhere where we're happy with it. Right down here, that block that I just placed as an example, it's such a minor difference in that little area, if you look at it, where that last skinny little block goes in place, that it's not necessarily difficult to have everything come together in a way that you're not going to notice it unless you're specifically looking in that area. So for this part of things, I'm more than happy to just kind of leave it the way it is and move on to the next area. You can see this is where it gets, for me, I kind of have to pause for a moment and get everything straight in my head before I start doing it. Otherwise, I start making a lot of mistakes, and that's getting 45 degree angles and 22.5 degree angles, especially compound angles, to pull back and towards something the way that we're doing it now. It's not difficult to do when you're working on the top and kind of sloping up, or, sloping off on 2 different angles at the same time, 2 different axes at the same time. But for some reason, starting at the bottom and sloping back, my brain takes a little while to kind of adjust to it so that we can make the right decisions about the blocks that we're going to use and ultimately get where we want it to go. You can see now we've got, somewhat following the profile, we've got it starting off at the bottom is basically vertical for a block or 2, and then it goes 22.5 degrees. And then briefly it goes 45 degrees, and then it starts sloping 22.5 degrees again in towards the middle where the core and the cockpit is. All we have to do now is basically finish filling in these gaps, duplicate all of this on the other side of this profile line, because we're just working on 1/2 of this single arm so far, and then duplicate the whole thing over on the other side, which for some people, using the mirror mode would make that much, much quicker and easier. Basically, as they were doing this side, the other side would be done automatically. Me being me, I just never really got accustomed to it, and I got accustomed to doing it my way. So I don't use the mirror mode, and I pay for it in the long run in terms of the time it takes me to get things done, but I'm okay with it. You see now, it's starting to take on kind of an odd shape on the front. If you look just at the front profile, it's got a section that's flat. And that flat section, if you follow the lines around the outside edges of it, it's kind of just a bizarre sort of shape. If I'm going to be unhappy with something to do with what I've just built, that's going to be the area where I'm unhappy, because those front profiles we see quite a lot, and it's not always the kind of thing that you're unhappy with as soon as you see it. As I've mentioned, give it a day or 2, and you've been looking at it for a little while, and all of a sudden you look at that shape, and you think, no. So we're going to leave it as it is. It's the kind of thing where if we do decide we want to change it, it most likely won't involve too much by way of an overhaul in order to make it a little bit closer to what we want. But in the short term, we're in pretty good shape. One of the things that I've decided with regards to this, because you'll probably notice, if you haven't noticed already, if you look down the side of the arm as it's going down the side of the hangar, it's fairly thick, and then as it moves up towards the top, it thins out. I'm actually going to be putting another layer on top of this area that's not going to line up. It's specifically going to be staggered and kind of drifted apart so to speak. And again, it's one of those things where I'm trying to describe what's in my head, and it may not necessarily make sense until you see it, but that's what we're going to be working on eventually. If you're looking at it and it looks a little bit wonky because it goes thicker and then thin, there is definitely a plan in the works to address that. So the next episode, we should have these two sidearms basically done, and you'll be able to look at them. But more importantly, I have no idea what I'm going to work on next. I feel like I want to start working on the front section, the bridge area or the cockpit area, depending on how you want to describe it for yourself. And that's going to take a little while. There's going to be at least a couple of episodes in that, getting everything sort of set up the way that I want it to be. And then we'll go from there. So if you want to be notified about the next episode and all of the episodes after that, the easiest way to do that is to subscribe to my channel or follow me on social media. Links for social media, as always, in the information section below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.